Being able to stitch on isolated elements is a very good trick to learn because you can scatter these little elements all about a design and not have threads interlocking them. So this first one is nothing more than a series of a bugle bead, a drop bead, and another bugle bead. And the bugle beads act as a stem. You can see how much that's wiggling underneath. And the beginning and ending stitch is right there at the edge of the bugle beads. This can be made longer, but putting more bugle beads in there, or a series of seed beads. You can create any kind of a configuration like that, and it will have tremendous movement on a garment. So as you do this again, you can see the beginning stitch is there, and there's the two bugle beads so that they're standing right next to each other. And they happen to, well, sometimes the thread gets caught, and they happen to just hang down on either side of the pendant bead, and with hardly any movement to the garment, they will create a tremendous movement, or a sense of movement to a garment. And they can be scattered all over. In a case like this, I would probably match the thread to the fabric, which would help to make it more disguised. Another trick is to do isolated sequins. Now in this case, I'm using a silver metallic thread rather than a white thread because I have a large clear sequin which you can just barely see through the fabric. So I go, and you'll notice that it's actually just the 1, 2, 3 of the beginning stitch. That's all it is. I don't add any other additional stitches. I put the sequin in during the course of those 1, 2, 3. So let's do that again. So I'm pulling my thread up. There's my first stitch. So as I go to make my second one, I go to the edge of the sequin, pull it, and then go back to the edge of the sequin, pull it again, and it makes one thread on the outside holding a sequin in place. So this is a very easy way to scatter sequins about a garment without having a lot of threads showing. And in this case, because they were clear sequins, I decided to use a metallic thread, give it a little bit more shine, a little bit more sparkle. But if it were a solid color sequin, you could do it with the same color thread, and it would pretty much disappear. This is a combination of long bugle beads and sequins strung specifically to add as individual elements, 2 pieces at a time. So we're going to start again with your basic beginning stitch, the 1, 2, 3. That starts everything. So there's the 1, the 2, and there's the 3. Now I'm going to push up the bead with the sequin at the very beginning of it. I take my stitch down at the end of the long bead, and I pull that stitch back up to the sequin. Now I need to get this thread back up there so that I can make another ending stitch right underneath the sequin. It's important in this case, you can see the thread that I've moved it to underneath the sequin. It's a little tricky to catch, but you can. So there's a second stitch, and there's a third stitch. All of those stitches and all of the thread is now underneath that sequin. And even though it's a clear sequin, the white threads pretty much disappear. On an opaque sequin, you would never see them. And you would not see any threads anywhere on the outside. It would just be the sequin with the bead coming from it. That bead could be a series of seed beads. It could be a long bugle bead. It could be any number of things. So again, beginning stitch, 1, 2, 3. And the individual unit, which consists of the sequin and the bead, go up. Take the stitch at the end of the bugle bead. I'm going to slow this down a little bit so it's a little easier to see. And then I pull the thread back up just as you would on any kind of a pulled stitch or a return stitch if you were turning around and stitching back in the other direction. This is where it's important to get that thread underneath that sequin. It's on the top there. I can see because when I moved it, the bead moved and it didn't catch on the stitch underneath the sequin. Sometimes you have to fidget it a little bit to get it under that sequin. Or you just lift the sequin. There we go. It's right underneath the sequin now. So now I can pull the rest of this back down. Take the stitch, because the sequin will kind of push itself out of the way of the hook when you go from underneath it. Particularly, this is a very large sequin, so it's a little easier, and it will hide a multitude of sins. So when you trim your threads off, you have an isolated element that, again, like the pendant ones, can be scattered about the surface. So here are the sequins. That's how they look on the front. You just see the one little thread, and you would clip off the excesses. Here are the pendant configurations, and again, those could be longer bugle beads, they could be double bugle beads, they could be a series of bugle beads and seed beads, or just seed beads. Any kind of a looping system like that that has a pendant bead at the bottom of it will make an interesting element and tremendous movement on a garment to be scattered about, or in a pattern. Either way, it's very, very useful and quite easy to do. And then the final element, where we have the sequin sitting underneath a bead. It's a little hard to see the clear sequins here, but if that were a metallic sequin or an opaque sequin or anything that had some color to it, it would look, it would give a completely different look to the unit.